All right, so hopefully I am live now. I wanted to start just a minute or two early and make sure that everything is coming through correctly. I know it takes a minute from when I start streaming. It takes about like a minute and a half or so, or about a minute from when I start streaming to when it actually shows up on YouTube. So I try to start early. Oh, there we go. It only took about 30 seconds. And my audio's coming through, which is good. Make sure. Awesome. Okay, my audio is coming through. My speed is fine, and I'm still 2 minutes early. Awesome. So I know, and I know we don't always get people live, but I know people do watch later. So to those of you who are watching later, thank you so much. I appreciate that, and please do leave comments. I do appreciate them. I see, this video has this many views, which is awesome. But the comments let me know that you're watching, that you have questions, that you are engaging with what I'm saying. So I do really appreciate those comments when I get them. Um, so just before we get started, I guess one quick announcement. If you are following me on social media, which the majority of you are, that's kind of how you get here. I don't think I have very many subscribers on YouTube who didn't come from either my Tumblr or maybe my Twitter, most likely my Tumblr. Um, but if you're coming from if you're not coming from one of those platforms, or you are and you didn't see this, I am on Parler now. So Parler, which is the new kind of free speech Twitter, what the free speech platform that Twitter was supposed to be, is the theory at least. And so I'm on Parler now as at Pro Life Pro Liberty, so same username as Tumblr. The only reason I don't have the exact same username on Twitter is because Twitter will not let me do a full pro life, pro liberty, like it's a character limit thing. So Twitter, it's pro life underscore liberty. And you can see on the bottom here, I've got my lower third, and I've got all my social media kind of handles there, except for my Parler. So I do need to update my lower third. I will do that before next week, um, and update that. I am working on getting this channel backed up through BitChute. BitChute. Don't misunderstand me there. BitChute, which is the which is the kind of also the free speech YouTube. Or there's lots of free speech YouTubes, but it's one of them. And theoretically, I can not only start putting videos on there that are also on YouTube, but I can also back up old videos. And I'm still working out those bugs in the system. But once that's done, I will kind of share out that information as well and be good to go. So it is 4 o'clock, or it's 4:01, and so I do want to get started. Especially because if you're watching later, you don't really care what time it is that I'm doing this. You just want me to get to the good stuff. So what I said I would talk about today is I specifically about birth control and fertility awareness. Now, notice I don't necessarily use natural family planning now on social media. I tagged it. Oh, I just realized I didn't click post on Parley or Parler. So on Parler, okay, I got to click that post button because Parler does not at this time let you schedule posts, which is a thing I hope they introduce soon, because that is something I love about both Tumblr and Twitter is I can schedule those posts and I don't have to go and post individually when I start streaming. Parler, I have to go post individually, so I kind of type up the post, get it ready to go, and then just hit send. When I start streaming, I almost forgot to do that. Now it's good. So anyway, I'm talking about birth control and specifically just some of the issues with it. And so people kind of treat birth control as this amazing, um, just, you know, amazing thing that liberated women, allowed women to have careers and all these kinds of things, which, we can talk separately about what the net impact of all of that has been on women. But specifically, I want to talk about what birth control has done physically to women. So not necessarily the socioeconomic or the cultural aspects of it. That's another video for another time and probably another person. I know that stuff. I wouldn't call myself the expert on all of it. I know there's a lot of great resources out there, but I want to look at specifically the negative side effects of birth control and what your other options are. Because a lot of times when I talk about birth control, women will come up and say, through my Tumblr, through my Twitter, whatever it is, they'll say, well, I have this issue, I have this situation, or my friend has this situation, or my sister has this situation, and without birth control, XYZ. So the assumption there is that birth control is the only solution to that particular problem. And so I want to kind of debunk that a little bit and talk about why birth control is not a good solution to those problems and why maybe we could maybe replace it with some different solutions. Um, and and still address those situational issues, right? So I don't want to dismiss those issues and be like, oh, those issues aren't real or birth control didn't really help you. I recognize that you may have had an experience where birth control did work and it did help you, and I'm glad you were able to get the help you needed, but I think there's a better way. And that one that can skip over some of the side effects that many women experience. So, you want to, like, somebody comes up with their anecdote of this is what birth control did for me. And it's like, okay, well, I've got like a dozen anecdotes of this is what birth control did to this person, that person, the other person, and how it harmed them. And, I have not gone on birth control personally because of this, because I have seen so many horror stories and I've seen what it can do to women's bodies. And as somebody who already has depression and anxiety, I have seen that it can have incredible impact in a negative way on women's mental health. And I do not want to take that risk. And I have known people in my life who have gone on birth control. And, there are people who I personally know who went on birth control and had very serious side effects, especially mental health wise. Okay. So it's not, there's the data, there's the statistics, there's the stories, and then there's my own personal experience as far as friends and people that I know um, who have had these awful, awful experiences with hormonal birth control specifically. You generally am talking about hormonal birth control, barrier methods. The problem with those, of course, is that they have a lower effectiveness rate, and we're going to talk a lot about effectiveness rates. Um, and so I'm not going to sit here and argue with you about barrier methods and any ethical or moral issues on those. I'm simply going to say they're not as effective. And so rather than relying on those, let's look at some other options. Um, and so for hormonal methods, we have these drug interactions, we have these side effects, we have these negative physical, emotional, psychological effects that these hormonal medications can have. And then we also have IUDs, which can either be hormonal or non hormonal. And I want to talk about both. And so, like, you have the copper IUD, which is supposed to be the non hormonal version. And you go, oh, well, it doesn't have hormones. Okay, that doesn't mean it's good and safe and effective and ethical and all of those things. So let's talk about just a few different things, and I'm going to do some screen sharing. Let's see. So the first thing that I want to do is, there we go. No, I don't need audio from that screen. And there we go. So we have the Mayo Clinic website, and we'll kind of get that going there. And so we have the Mayo Clinic website, and they have, let me go up to the top here. So, of course, there's Mayo Clinic, there's a little COVID-19 blurb that every website has to have now. But we talk about, like, they have all this stuff about why birth control pills are prescribed. And it has all these things that sound like good things. But we're going to talk about how maybe there are other options for these things, right? And so it talks about the different kinds of birth control pills. So there's kind of the conventional ones, and then there's the continuous dosing. And this one, these kinds are really concerning, and this 365-day pill. Um, this right here is extra concerning to me because of the way it works. We're talking about how birth control works. But here are some, problems with it. And so there's here's just some contraindications, and you don't necessarily hear about those from the kind of the messaging around birth control. You don't necessarily hear about these are situations where you shouldn't be taking it, a birth control pill. And the thing about birth control is the birth control pill and the other types of hormonal birth control, they're all using very similar medications. They're using very similar combinations of hormones. So you tend to see very similar risks and side effects for all hormonal birth control methods. You're kind of looking at more or less the same thing. There's some variations, and maybe you have a great doctor who's good at figuring out um, which version is going to be better for you. But there's better options, and I want us to appreciate those better options. But anyway, so these are some people, some situations where you shouldn't be taking birth control if you're in the first month of breastfeeding. So here's a question: why? Why does being in the first month of breastfeeding matter? Well, because it's messing with your hormones, and if you're breastfeeding, you need certain hormones to keep that milk supply going, and also because, and we're going to talk about this, it gives you a risk of depression, and if you are depressed, you're going to have a harder time breastfeeding. So that's a thing there. Older than 35 and smoke. Again, why is that? It's because you have cancer risk. There are some cancer risks. So they talk earlier here about, um, decreased risk of ovarian and endometrial cancers and some other things, um, which, yeah, benign breast disease, but, we have breast cancer risk with the birth control pill. So anyway, there are cancer risks with the birth control pill. So if you're older than 35 and you smoke, and there's also stroke risk and things like that. So we'll talk about those. Have poorly controlled high blood pressure, have DVT or pulmonary embolism, stroke or heart disease, breast cancer, history of breast cancer. Again, because it can. So even though up here it says a decreased risk of benign breast disease, down here it's saying if you have a history of breast cancer, you should not take this pill. Why? Because it increases your risk, because you're introducing hormones that can kickstart those cancers. Migraines with aura. If you get migraines and you get the visual halos, the visual auras, um, that sort of thing. If you have diabetes related complications, nephropathy, retinopathy, neuropathy, um, liver disease, unexplained uterine bleeding, or going to be immobilized for a prolonged period, which that goes back up to the DVT and pulmonary embolism, because if you're going to be sedentary, you're more likely to get blood clots. So what they're saying here is that the birth control pill increases your risk for blood clot. And so therefore, if you are, so again, so even if you don't fit in any of these categories, you can already see where some of these problems are. And I just realized I don't have my chat up, and I don't, yeah, okay, we're good. Anyway, so, as sorry, I'll just do that real quick. So, as we're even looking at this much so far, it just is already, um, we're already looking at this. This is not a good situation, right? This is not something that you want, to be taking every day. And like going up here, the different types of birth control pills. It's like, oh, you take it for 21 days, and then you take an inactive pill for like a placebo for 7 days, and that's supposed to be so you keep your routine up. Because if you just take a break for 7 days and don't take any pills, you're more likely to fall out of the habit of taking it every day. And then, the continuous dosing, that's 84 pills you're taking every day for 84 days, or you're taking it 365 days a year. You're literally taking this medication 365 days a year, and you're exposing yourself to these risks. And so again, if you're taking this continuous dosing or extended cycle, treatment or regimen, because it's not really a treatment, because you're not diseased because you have a reproductive system, and that's the other thing we're going to talk about. Um, you know, then you're exposing yourself to a higher level of risk, and than if you take the conventional pack. So, if you're going to be on birth control, at the least do the conventional pack or the lower dosage, because I don't want any of this nonsense here. Here's some of the other risks: breakthrough bleeding or spotting. So that just means you might have some bleeding or spotting like you would during your period, but just at times that you're not necessarily expecting it. And that actually indicates that, breakthrough bleeding or spotting, that indicates that you've ovulated, um, even though you were taking this birth control pill. So that's an important thing to note, is you may still ovulate, which means you could still get pregnant. And we're going to talk about that with failure rates and things like that. Breast tenderness, elevated blood pressure, headaches, nausea, bloating. That's not so bad. Then we have blood clots in the legs, heart attack and stroke, liver disorders, gallbladder disease. And then, they said, look at, go to your doctor if you have any of these things. So, but those are still kind of like, eh, you know, um, this still doesn't sound too bad, right? And it talks about, different things about, what to take and how to take it and everything like that. Well, now I want to go here to Marie Claire. Let's see, share screen. So Marie Claire, it's a women's fashion magazine, and I'm not, I don't watch a lot of fashion magazine, or I don't follow a lot of like fashion magazines um, necessarily. But sorry about that. It's hard for me to like. There we go. So going back up to the top here. So this is Marie Claire. Again, it's a fashion magazine, women's magazine. I don't read it normally. I found it when I was looking for kind of birth control horror stories, and I was looking to see, okay, what are the real stories, behind all those side effects and risks that are listed there. And so it has this little thing up here about how the pill revolutionized the lives of women, and we can debate again whether that was a good thing or a bad thing. But um, and it talks about all this stuff like blah 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 blah, all the things that, but then here's all the things that can go wrong. Um, so this is, so here we have a woman, Jordan Ward. She was about to get married. She gets migraines. She finds out that she had a stroke and didn't know it. And she had a blood clot from her birth control pill. Um, and so she needed to stop. And Jordan Ward did smoke. So again, that raised her risk even further. So again, if you're smoking and taking birth control, okay, think about that. Think about how many people who smoke and take birth control. Like, think about how often that happens. Do women realize that how high their risk is if they're doing that? There's another one. This is she was a skater, and she was hoping to go into the Olympics. She was training for the Olympics, and she started using the contraceptive vaginal ring. So that is, rather than the pill that you take every day, that is a ring that is inserted and it stays for a long time. Um, and again, it is giving you hormones, right? And so the whole point is, oh, you don't have to take a pill every day. It's more convenient. And then she collapses during training. And so you think about somebody who is an athlete who's really concerned about, um, you know, avoiding pregnancy, let's say, or, maybe managing her period symptoms so that she can train. And so she takes this hormonal contraceptive, and she collapses during training. She was struggling to breathe. She had, difficulty breathing, which we know that's like your go to the hospital thing. She had a blood clot in her lungs. And they were life-threatening clots. And so she had to use a breathing machine. She was put on blood thinners, and there's more of these. It was this is another one where um, a writer, she writes an essay about how her birth control ring gave her abrupt mood swings, and she says it took control of me. It made me different. It made me darker. And she was depressed. She was agoraphobic. She said it felt like the Horcruxes in Harry Potter, where or the ring in Lord of the Rings. It's another one where you've just got this like, it's just messing with your mind. And that's the thing, is you're taking hormones, and hormones are how your body communicates between different organ systems and everything, and you're interfering with that communication, and things are going to go wrong. Erica, she goes, she uses the vaginal ring, and she collapses in her apartment on Thanksgiving Day and dies at the hospital. And she ended up turns out she had multiple pulmonary embolisms, and she became brain dead. Which, I mean, but she lost all brain activity and she died. Murderous rage. So this woman Jill Foster, she talks about how she felt she felt murderous rage at an almost empty carton of orange juice. Like it's this irrational mood swing. And that's the thing, is we're always told, oh, women are so emotional, women have these mood swings. Well, how much of that is because for the last 50 years plus, so many women have been medicated for something that is not a disease. It's one thing to take a medication when you have a disease. If you have a disease, if you have a mental illness and you need medication for that mental illness, of course. If you have a physical illness and you need medication for that, of course. But what about when you don't have an illness and you're using medication to suppress natural functions of your body? Why? Why are we doing this? And so you can keep going through those. And I linked a couple other articles in the description that you can look at. But it really, like, when you look at all of this, it's hard for me to understand why, well, it's not hard for me to, I know exactly why this information isn't more widely known, why women don't often realize how dangerous hormonal contraception is. It's because there is a lobby, there is a birth control, family planning, abortion lobby that pushes this. And a lot of people say, well, wait a second, what does birth control have to do with abortion? Doesn't birth control prevent abortion? No, it doesn't. And we'll talk about that. But first, I want to talk about, what is it about a woman's natural reproductive cycle, a woman's natural fertility, that needs to be suppressed? Why do we need to suppress something that is natural, something that is healthy, on its own? And again, we're going to talk about, what if you don't have a healthy reproductive system? What if there is something going wrong? We'll talk about that. But if you're healthy and you're having a normal cycle, you're ovulating, you're having, your period, you're doing all that stuff, and it's normal and you're fine, why put somebody on a birth control pill? And doctors start putting young girls on birth control, as soon as they hit puberty, as soon as they start having their period. Doctors are like, well, let's put you on birth control. Wait a second, why? Why is that needed? Why are we so eager to put this controlling medication, the suppressive medication, in women's bodies as soon as they have a reproductive system that's, kind of active and doing what it's supposed to do? And so, there's also another one that I put in the description. There's another thing from drugs.com. Let's do that real quick. And I want, just because I don't want to spend too much time today going through every single birth control option or medication, and all the differences between them. I just wanted to give this to you. So this is the drugs.com link. It's down there in the description. And here's all of these different medications. And then it's like, it's like 10 plus pages, right?
And so, but it's this chart, and it says, so all of them say don't take during pregnancy, which, makes sense because they're a birth control pill. I think this is the chart they use for all drugs, I don't think it's specific to that. But interacts with alcohol. Look at how many of these are, you shouldn't have them or you shouldn't drink alcohol while taking these. Look at how many of these, right? Mirena, that's a real common one, right? NuvaRing, that's one of the rings. You're inserting that and leaving it there, right? Interacts with alcohol, okay? And so, and these are prescription. This one is over the counter. But again, interacts with alcohol. So you may not even have a conversation with your doctor. You might just be getting this over the counter, okay? And not knowing that you're not supposed to drink alcohol with it, okay? And the thing is, part of the reason that many, one of the reasons that some women are on birth control is because they want a pregnancy prevention method that they don't have to think about, because they essentially want to be able to go out and party, for some women, and not all, and there's also women who have very different reasons for being on birth control. But there are women out there who they want to be able to go out and have fun, have a good time, and if they happen to go home with somebody or whatever, they want to be protected from pregnancy. But how many of these interact with alcohol? Well, look at all of this. All of this right in this column here, interact with alcohol. Okay, so again, we're not getting the accurate information on this. We're not, we're not seeing the accurate facts.
We're not getting the facts on this. So I just wanted to show you those, but I want to spend more time today. Hopefully that kind of explains that it's not a healthy, natural thing to take birth control. Your reproductive system is supposed to function. You're supposed to ovulate. You're supposed to go through your cycle every 28-ish days. Everybody's different, but that's normal and that's healthy. And just to do this whole kind of thing where we have to control that, and so many people are so concerned about what they put in their bodies. They eat organic, they eat healthy, they eat all this natural stuff. They're like, oh, I don't want processed foods, and I don't want foods. And this is my favorite. I don't want dairy products that have hormones in them, right? Because you want milk from cows that are raised hormone free. You want hormone free milk, right? Well, if you're doing that, but then you're ingesting hormones every day that you don't need, that aren't healthy for you, that increase your risk of all these things, why is that, why is that necessary? And so now what I want to do, and again, if you've followed me before, if you've been following me for a long time, you've seen this website that I'm about to show you. It won't be anything new. There we go. Naturalwomanhood.org. Again, linked in the description below. Know your body, and it talks about not relying on chemicals. Okay, we talk about chemicals. We talk about chemicals in our food. We talk about not wanting to live more naturally and more a healthier life. There's nothing natural about birth control, and we can go through the history of birth control and how it was used, how it was developed by Margaret Sanger and other researchers, using experiments on Puerto Rican women without informed consent. They consented, but they didn't really know what was happening. They didn't know what they were being given. They didn't know what the risks were. And many women died or had very serious health effects, long-term, long-lasting health effects from those birth control experiments. Then the birth control pill was pushed out on women in the 60s, in the 50s, and the 60s, and then women in America were having these health effects, and they finally did turn the dosage down. But that just gives you that. It's that more long term. It becomes that long term impact of long term usage. The longer you're using birth control, the more years that you spend on birth control, the more havoc it's wreaking on your reproductive system. So if you're looking at this and either you've never been on birth control or you're on birth control and you want to stop, but you're like, well, what do I do instead? If I want to prevent pregnancy, if I want to manage my health, what do I do instead? And I'm going to talk about fertility awareness. So, fertility awareness, and I don't use the word natural family planning, term natural family planning for a reason. First of all, it just has been given a bad name. And second of all, because this is not necessarily family planning. It can be. You can use it for family planning, but you don't have to, right? There are other purposes, there are other uses for fertility awareness besides family planning. So, we have naturalwomanhood.org, and they have an amazing website. So, again, birth control side effects, they have information on all these things. They have all that kind of stuff, right? So, you can look there too. Um, they have stuff about understanding your cycle, but what I want to look at here, go natural birth control methods. And so, they talk about some of the different ways that you can do this, but essentially, what fertility awareness is, it's getting to know your own body and listening to your body, because your body will tell you what's going on, right? And this works for fertility as far as preventing pregnancy, achieving pregnancy. It can be used for both. It's all about giving you the information to be able to make informed decisions about your whether or not you're going to try to get pregnant or try to avoid pregnancy. And so you're looking at these, so we look at this fertility awareness thing. We can also use it to get more information about our own health, and doctors can use it to diagnose and treat reproductive health conditions. So when you talk about like, oh, well, I have PCOS, I have endometriosis, I have all this stuff. Yes, you can use birth control to sometimes suppress symptoms. You can suppress some of those conditions using birth control, using hormonal medication like that. It doesn't cure or really treat those conditions. It suppresses or it masks symptoms. And so if your concern is those health issues, yes, birth control can be a stopgap measure. And for some women, it stops the symptoms. And for some women, they're like, that's all I care about. It stopped the symptoms. That's all I needed. But if you're thinking, well, wait a second, what if I want something more than that? What if I don't want to be dependent on this drug forever? And on my channel, I've talked about what happens if one day you couldn't get that drug? What happens if you've been taking this drug, if you're dependent on this drug, and then one day you can't get it? You go to your pharmacy and they don't have it anymore. What if one day you don't have access to that medication? What will you do? Do you want to be dependent on this medication? Do you want to be dependent on this drug forever? Or do you want to be able to get off of it and have your reproductive system be healthy again? So we'll talk about those in a minute, but so this just has some great information about how fertility awareness works, but I really want to get down here to this table. And we're just going to look at this table, and I know it kind of format's weird on this page, but we're going to talk about effectiveness rates, because one of the arguments that I hear from people, or when I bring up fertility awareness and people realize that I am referring to what they think of as natural family planning, or they think that that's what I'm referring to anyway. They are like, oh, natural family planning, that's the rhythm method, that's the calendar method, that's not effective. And it comes from the CDC information. So if you go to the CDC and you look at their listing of contraceptive methods and contraception in general, they have this table that lists all these contraceptive methods and lists all these different hormonal and barrier methods. And then it lists natural family planning as one thing, as though it were one method. And what they did is, for the statistic there, they took data, much of it bad data from bad studies, for women using a wide variety of different methods, some of which were not very scientific. and not very effective, and others were more effective. And so they got this rate of 75%. And so they'll tell you that natural family planning is 75% effective. Well, no. No. Yeah, if you take all those averages of all those different methods, but not if you actually break it down to the individual methods. So the different fertility awareness methods have different pros and cons, and they have different effectiveness rates. Now, I want to real quick, let's see if I can, oh, no, that's not helpful. I hope you can see this on your screen here. But over here, we have the method. This column is the method. So we have the Billings method. So these are all up to here, up to the Marquette method. These are all fertility awareness methods. And they're not the only ones that are out there, but these are kind of the most common, the most popular. Um, so you have these methods here. And then you have kind of your traditional birth control methods. You have the pill, you have condoms, and NuvaRing and the vaginal ring. And the Depo-Provera and the IUD and all those also have some similar effectiveness rates. You can look up those effectiveness rates. But what I want to clarify here is method effectiveness versus use effectiveness. You want to know which number you're looking at. You do not want to compare method effectiveness against use effectiveness. You want to compare apples to apples. Method effectiveness is if you were to use the method that they're talking about. I'll highlight this. There we go. Method effectiveness, if you're going to use the method 100% perfectly every single time. So this is the theoretical effectiveness, is what I like to call it. This is in theory, based on the math, right? Based on the science, the math, or whatever. This is how effective it should be. Again, this is how effective it should be if everything is perfect. So for the birth control pill, this is assuming you take it at the same time every day. It's assuming that your dosage is adjusted for your weight. So if you're on birth control and your dosage has not been adjusted for your weight, we're not looking at method effectiveness, right? Your effectiveness is going to go down because as with any medication, the dosage you need has to be adjusted to your weight. So women who are on the heavier side tend to have lower effectiveness or a higher rate of pregnancy while on birth control because the dosage has not been adjusted. And for most women, they don't get their dosage adjusted. Their doctor just prescribes them the birth control and doesn't do the calculations necessary to give them the right dosage for their weight. And the same can also be said for a woman who is underweight. You might be getting too much, which might heighten your risks for some of those side effects. So you need to talk to your doctor and ask your doctor, has the dosage on this medication been adjusted for my weight and for my specific needs? Right? And they're going to, no, they don't do that. So most likely they're going to say no. And they'll say, oh, you don't need to do that. Yes, yes, you do. So method effectiveness is just that. It's everything is perfect. So for fertility awareness, the method effectiveness assumes that you are 100% perfect about charting. And so when we talk about fertility awareness and charting, essentially what you're doing is you're taking data on your own body. You're listening to the signs of your own body and you're keeping track of them. And you can use a variety of ways to do this. Most methods, there's apps out there that make it really, really easy to track. That other people will do it on paper. If you're just more of a pen and paper journaling, if you like to journal, fertility awareness is great for you because this is something you can so easily journal and it's awesome. If you're somebody who likes to keep a diary, who likes to keep a journal, who does the bullet journaling, you can do fertility awareness in a bullet journal so easily, right? It very well lends itself to that. Okay, so anyway, so it assumes that you're doing it perfectly. It assumes that you're 100% perfect every single time. And that's method effectiveness. So I would almost just throw out method effectiveness altogether because it really does not apply to your everyday life, to you as an individual, because chances are you're not perfect. Now, maybe just maybe, if you are the type A, super organized, I've got my life together, I have my planners, and I never miss anything, and I never forget anything, and I'm always perfect, okay, you could maybe look at the method effectiveness. But I wouldn't compare those. When you're choosing a method, I would compare use effectiveness when you choose a method, because use effectiveness is more likely going to be what you experience, right? As a real person in a real situation, um, doing your thing. So when we look at the use effectiveness rate here, Billings method is the lowest of the fertility awareness methods. They're the lowest with 83 to 89 points, so 83%. And I always look at the lowest number, right? The lowest number, because you want to know, what if I fall into that low category? And when they say 83 to 89.5%, it's because different studies have been done that have found different methods. So like, what if you fall into that category, whatever the confounding variables were that made it that lower effectiveness rate? Just, you might as well assume the lower number rather than assuming that you're safer from pregnancy than you are. And again, this is assuming that you're trying to avoid pregnancy. And we'll talk about being able to achieve pregnancy, which birth control can't do. Birth control can't help you achieve pregnancy. Okay. And sometimes doctors will prescribe it because they're like, oh, you need to regulate your hormones, because does not make sense. And anyway, so use effectiveness, 83 to 89 point, so 83%, that's the lowest we have here. Creighton also goes down to 83, so I guess these two are the lowest, but Creighton goes up to 96.8%. Again, that's going to be dependent on your level of how well you adhere to the system. Now, and the other thing that's dependent on when you look at these fertility awareness methods is how strongly do you want to avoid pregnancy? Because sometimes the data is skewed, because there are some who will use these fertility awareness methods for spacing pregnancies, right? They're saying, oh, I want, 2 years or 1 year or how many years between my children. I don't want Irish twins. I don't want, as far as, I don't want right back to back. I don't want to them to be too close together. I want to space them out. Maybe I want 2 years, maybe I want 3 years in between my children. For somebody like that, they're going to use this method, but they're also, because they're still planning to have more children, they're also not going to be as strict about the method, because if they do get pregnant, it's not that big of a deal. And so there are many people out there who use these methods to delay pregnancy, but they're not all that, it's not all that big of a deal to them. And so if they miss a day here, if they make a mistake here or there, whatever, it's not a big deal. There's other people where they have life circumstances where they say, I cannot get pregnant right now. I am not in a position to raise a baby. I'm not in a position to even deal with a pregnancy. It's just, I can't do it. So I need a method that is as effective as possible. And so for those situations, you're going to follow the rules more carefully. You're going to take fewer unnecessary risks. Again, assuming pregnancy is a risk. Pregnancy is a beautiful thing, brings forth a new life, but there are some times where you're in a life situation where it is not conducive to giving that child the best opportunity, and so you want to avoid pregnancy. And that's understandable. Like, I understand if you need to avoid pregnancy because of the circumstances that you're in. I don't want to talk bad about that. But so anyway, I know we're already at like 40 minutes here, so let me just kind of move along here. But anyway, so if we're looking at these methods, one of the highest use effectivenesses is the Symptothermal Method, or Couple to Couple League. That's an organization that does classes on how to do it. Again, you don't have to go through them, but they are a good resource if you're looking to do symptothermal. Symptothermal is my favorite. That is my preferred method, because of its effectiveness rate and because of how easy it is. So both Billings and Creighton are a little trickier, and there's a little bit of interpretation that goes in with it, especially when you're looking at cervical mucus, because that's the kind of their main thing. They're mainly looking at cervical mucus, and when you're looking at cervical mucus, there are some there's some places where I'm like, oh, is it this kind of mucus? Is it, you're trying to figure out what category you fit into. Symptothermal is a little clearer. It's a little simpler as far as not being as subjective, I guess you could say, because you're looking at both the cervical mucus and you're looking at temperature. And so you kind of have those two backing each other up. So if you're not sure on one, you can kind of look at the other, and they kind of back each other up. And that's why it has that higher use effectiveness rate. The low end of the use effectiveness is 97.8%. Now let's compare that to pill. The pill is 91%, right? So we have 97.8% and 91% as use effectiveness. I'm going to take the 97.8%. If I'm trying to avoid pregnancy, I'm going to choose this over this. And I'm going to choose no drugs, right? I'm going to choose fewer health risks. I'm going to choose lower risk of cancer. I'm going to choose lower risk of stroke and blood clots and all these things over higher risk, right? I'm going to choose less hormones, less artificial hormones specifically. Natural hormones are a good thing when your body produces them or when you're given them, or like when your hormones are out of balance and your doctor's helping get them back in balance. That's fine, but that's like, I'm going to choose this every time. A great app, which I will put that in the description. I'm sorry I did not do that already. I will put that in the description. A great app for this is the and let me just double check that I'm saying the name right. It's the app that I use. Kindara, Kindara, and I will put a link in the description later. But Kindara is the app that I use. It is very easy to use and it has a very good knowledge base feature in the app that tells you exactly how to do it. It's very, very clear. Now, like as a disclaimer, a lot of people when talking about natural family planning or fertility awareness, as a disclaimer, we'll do this whole like, you have to take the class, you have to pay X amount of money and take the class. If you're going to do fertility awareness, you can't just do it by yourself. I'd love to just do that disclaimer and blah 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 blah, but you know what? It is 2020, and we have the internet at our fingertips, and you can do your own research. If you are concerned that you don't understand, if you don't understand it, if you've done the research and you don't get how it works, yes, go take the class. I'm not going to say that you have to take the class because again, the symptothermal method is real easy. It's not that hard. You can figure it out. You're smart. Okay. All you need is a basal body temperature thermometer. Now, I know thermometers are in shorter supply right now, but during pre COVID times, you could get one for $15 at CVS. Probably, you know what? Let me just go on Amazon, the Amazon.com. And let me share my screen. You can watch. Well, actually, no. Yeah, actually, yeah. You can see my screen. Share my screen. Okay, so there's my screen. There's my Amazon. I'm not logged in. At first, I was like, oh, if I'm logged in, I don't want to share my screen, but I'm not logged in. This is on my other window here. And basal body thermometer. Again, I know they're not like, but oh my goodness, yeah, this is even better. Back when I first got my thermometer, I spent $15 for one that was just a basic one. This is like, this is a digital one with memory recall and everything. I want to say, is it Bluetooth? There's no way. There's no way it's Bluetooth. Okay, no, manually enter data. Um, it will not. It does not Bluetooth. I was gonna say for $10 if it was Bluetooth, that'd be amazing. But anyway, it comes with an app. They have an app that is associated with that brand. So anyway, $10, $13, $15. Yeah, you can get them on Amazon. Lots of highly reviewed ones. With the basal body, the reason what this is different is it's an under the tongue, and it some can also be used vaginally, but you do not want to wake up at the same time every morning and stick that there. So I wouldn't. You can if you're like super concerned about being ultra accurate, but under your tongue will work just fine. So you can get one of these, you stick it under your tongue, and it gives you out to 2 decimal places, and that's the important thing. Like a normal in ear or under the tongue or forehead thermometer for like seeing if you have a fever, it only got to 1 decimal point or decimal place. You want to go to 2 decimal places because you need to be able to see those shifts in temperature, and that's because that's what you do with symptothermal is you track the temperature and you look for a spike, and that spike is your ovulation, and you look for that spike to stay put for 3 days and then go back down. And so that's how you are tracking to see where you are in your cycle, that plus your cervical fluid, so or cervical mucus. And so you're looking at your cervical fluid or your cervical mucus, and essentially, if you're trying to avoid pregnancy, you're literally just looking to see if there is cervical fluid or cervical mucus, and it's not as complicated as it is with Creighton and with Billings, but then you're using the thermometer to know when you've ovulated, and 3 days after you ovulate, you are then safe to resume sexual activity without risk of pregnancy, because you've ovulated, the egg is gone, and you're not going to ovulate again until your next cycle. And the 3 days is actually in case you get a second, because sometimes you do ovulate, you do release 2 eggs in one cycle, and that 3 days is in case you release two. So usually it's only like 24 to 36 hours or something like that that egg is there. But we do 72 just to be safe in case there were 2 eggs, in case one got released later or whatever. So you do 3 days. But anyway, so there's all these good options here. Don't do a forehead. Don't do a forehead thermometer for this. Do one that is under the tongue. You can spend a little bit more and get the Bluetooth, right? I think this is a Bluetooth. It's got the app. Is it Bluetooth? Yes, it is Bluetooth. So, and that looks like it's the same company as that other one. But so you can get a Bluetooth one. Kindara has a very expensive thermometer that they sell that pairs with their app. You don't need to get their thermometer. You can. It is a very good thermometer. I did end up getting it. It is very, very nice, but you do not have to. A $10, this $10 one will work just fine, right? Like this $15 one, just fine. You do not need to get the expensive one. Don't let them pressure you into that, right? Again, $12, $13, all of these are fine. So again, those are all options that you can use. So so now to go back to talking again, I've got like 10 minutes and then I need to go. So I need to do this part in like the next 10 minutes because I'm already going way too long here. So we are now looking at naturalwomanhood.org again. Reproductive health disorders. Here we go. Okay. So again, PCOS, endometriosis, PMS, any of these things, cysts, ovarian cysts, all these things. Okay, infertility, if you are trying to have a baby and you are having trouble, if you have miscarriages, right? If you've been trying to have children, you've been getting pregnant, you've been having a miscarriage, and you're sad and frustrated because you've lost your baby, and you're wanting to try and have a baby again, like you really want to, but you're scared and all of that. Like, here we go. So I have linked all of these things in the description. But when we talk about the health things, you're probably going to end up taking a class if you're doing it for health reasons because you do need to be super duper accurate. But there's Symptopro, there's Marquette is a little bit that's not my favorite because it does require you to requires more stuff and it ends up costing you a little bit more. But Couple to Couple League, again, for Symptothermal Method. So there's all these organizations that will do these. Here we go. Creighton Fertility Care. So if you've got these health issues, let's sorry. Okay. So Fertility Care Centers of America, again, linked in the description.
There we go. They use the Creighton model system. So if you have reproductive health issues, you may need to look at the Creighton model just because that one does lend itself better to diagnosing those health issues. Not to say that you couldn't necessarily do it with symptothermal or that you couldn't add the thermometer, the temperature aspect of it. You could definitely add the temperature aspect. You could combine the two methods and it would be more effective, not less. If you're doing the Creighton model system, doing the Creighton model system and you add temperature to it from the symptothermal, that's not necessarily a bad thing. And the Condor app will actually let you track all that stuff. So, it talks about the Creighton model system, but let's look at NAPRO technology. So NAPRO technology is this idea of using the information from your fertility awareness method to diagnose first, get an accurate diagnosis, and then to treat your health condition. So they're using the Creighton model fertility care system, so specifically their specific version of the system, to biomarkers to look at different hormonal events during the menstrual cycle. So basically, it allows you and your doctor to get more information on what is really going wrong. So when you're having a health issue, a reproductive health issue, it identifies the problem and cooperates with your body to actually, fix the problem and to protect your ability to have children in the future. Maybe you don't want children right now, but you want them someday. But you have this reproductive health issue, and maybe your OBGYN told you can never have children because of this reproductive health issue. Yeah, false, or at least not. They can't say that. They can't make that claim. They can't say, "Oh, you'll never have children," because blah blah blah. No. So you can treat all these different things: infertility, repetitive miscarriage, menstrual cramps, premenstrual syndrome, ovarian cysts, irregular normal bleeding, polycystic ovarian disease / syndrome, PCOS, postpartum depression, prematurity prevention. So basically preventing you from having a premature baby. Like if you're, you had a baby born prematurely, you're worried about having another premature baby. Hormonal abnormalities, chronic discharges, and other health issues. Even depression. I've seen it used for depression because sometimes depression and anxiety are hormonal imbalances. And so you can use it for that. So then find a medical consultant. If you go on here, Fertility Care Centers of America, NAPRO Technology, find a medical consultant, and then they give you, I don't know why they just don't take you directly to the directory, but this, which then I have to share this again. I don't know why they I wish it could just follow along. Here we go.
Okay, so here's the directory, and again, it's hard to see, but you can zoom in a little bit, and I'm not going to show, you can look up all the names, but here's all the cities and states, right? So again, they're not everywhere, but if you are in a place that does not have one of these, we've got a few in Texas. We got one. I got one. Dr. Calmerides in Austin, Texas, who is awesome. But if you are not in a place that does not have one of these doctors, then I would go and find a OBGYN, maybe even a DO, which is the Austin. I'm not gonna try and remember what that is because I don't want to get it wrong. But just find a doctor who does more natural treatments, who supports natural health and herbal medicine, maybe even, and then talk to them about this. And they're probably going to be much more open to this. Even if they don't already practice it, they're going to be willing to learn. They're going to be willing to do the research in order to treat you better. Some OBGYNs just aren't willing to go learn new things, which is sad. But there's that. And then I also linked in the description FemHealth, which is another organization that does that kind of stuff. They do the fertility awareness based treatments. So anyway, to wrap this all up, there are better options out there for you. You are not limited to hormonal birth control. There is help. If you want to get off of hormonal birth control or you want to avoid getting on it, but you're concerned about preventing pregnancy or about your reproductive health, fertility awareness might be the answer for you. So again, I don't, this didn't go into every single aspect of this, and I'm sure like I left out a lot of things because I only gave myself an hour here, and I rambled a little bit. So if you have questions on this, if you're like, well, what about this situation? What about that situation? Can I use it for this? Can I use it for that? Uh, let me know in the comments or contact me through Tumblr or through Twitter or through Parler and let me know if you have questions. Or just go check out the links that I provided and just kind of get a sense of what is out there and what the options are. But again, I'll add that Kindara link in the description in a minute here. But I mean, really, if you just search Kindara on the App Store, it is there, and it's a great app for Symptothermal Method. But again, let me know if you have questions about this and what other kinds of things you would want to talk about. In the title of this episode, I titled it "No BC for Me." And I've used that hashtag on social media, especially Twitter lately. But if you are somebody who has, who's had a negative experience with birth control, those stories aren't always shared. People will talk about how birth control allowed them to have a career, allowed them to do this or that. Speak up. Let people know that this is not the miracle that it is portrayed as, right? There are real problems with hormonal birth control. There are real risks for women. There are real side effects. Let people know. And use the hashtag NoBC4Me in order to express that. And let's get these stories out there. And I'm going to continue to use that hashtag, not because I've had a negative experience, but because I've seen the negative experiences and I understand that I do not want to be in that situation. So thank you guys. Thank you those who are watching later. And thank you everybody. And please let me know just what you would like me to talk about next week or what other ideas you have. And I will see you all again next week on Pro Life, Pro Liberty Live.